Today we're going to be looking at a Radiant Charizard based build of Lost Zone Box. This is my personal preference way to play the deck right now. I believe that the deck has simply more space to play Ball Search cards, Pokégears, and just keeping that really high count of Switch cards and Beach Court to be able to dance between your Comfeys to help you simply flower select to 4 and 10 as effectively as possible, especially with the Lost Vacuums in the deck list. So we are sacrificing a little bit of draw power by removing Radiant Greninja, but the Greninja forces the deck to play a lot of extra things. It needs to add many more energy cards, also sometimes energy recyclers, and the Mirage Gates themselves. So yes, it's true that you see more cards with the Greninja builds of Lost Zone. You also have more cards that can be clunky in the opening stages. So many people have noticed that the Radiant Charizard build has a few less tricks up its sleeve, but is able to get into the game quite well, and has the rinse and repeat of, frankly, some of the best attackers in the game in Sableye once it gets to 10 in the Lost Zone, and Radiant Charizard for that higher damage output. So let's start with the sort of main aspect of the deck, which is we have the early tempo of Cram and Sableye, but we're working towards a Combustion Blast win condition into multi-prize decks. So as our opponent starts to take prize cards, our attack cost gets cheaper with this Combustion Blast attack, which costs 1 fire and 4 colorless, but is -1 colorless for each prize card the opponent has taken. So once they've taken, 4 prizes, you just need to get 1 fire energy on, and because we're an all single prize deck, we can try and use Charizard twice before the opponent wins the game. When they go down to 4 prizes, we can respond with Charizard, then they go down to 1 prize when they knock out the Charizard inevitably. We can try and recycle that Charizard and take, again, another huge swing of damage. So this deck really works towards really high damage output in the later stages. So essentially your goal a lot of the time is just take fast, easy prizes. And we know that the Lost Zone decks are really good at that because they have the early tempo of Cramorant once you just get to 4 in the Lost Zone, and Sableye with that Lost Mine that can place 12 counters once you have 10 cards in the Lost Zone. So there are a couple other Pokemon in here as techs. The Miltank is a really interesting one. It's actually mostly in here for Klefki. We don't have many other great ways of dealing with Klefki, especially with me cutting Mawile. If you want to play Mawile instead of this card, you simply can. You can try and Mawile trap a Klefki and then come in with a scratch from a Sableye. It's still a 2 energy way of dealing with a Klefki, but it would require 1 additional search card, so I think I prefer the Miltank in that avenue where you can just route through Klefkis in the opening stages. Klefki is still somewhat around in some Mewtwo builds of Gardevoir, some Miraidons, and a handful of other things here and there, so I feel better safe than sorry and still have that Miltank, but I know a number of people can cut this card knowing that it's fairly rare that you run into Klefki, but I'm still of the opinion that better safe than sorry is a way to go. Also, this can be pretty threatening against Goodra-based builds of Lost Zone decks, because you only really have to get through 1 of their Cram, and then they have Greninja, which really isn't all that good at dealing with Miltank, so even if you fall really far behind into Goodra, you can try and make a comeback play with Miltank, so it also has that sort of comeback potential. And some random builds of Arc decks, which aren't playing Dura or Tina, may not have a way around this. So if they're going to play like Flying Pikachu style stuff, you can have the Miltank in the active and build towards your Cross Switcher Rope combos. So these are things to bear in mind as well. The Hawlucha is definitely in here to help out against the mirror match with that flying entry, but is also helpful against Lugia because they have some 130 hit point Pokemon. So you can Hawlucha Sableye combo. Sometimes you need to rope in there as well, but it's a nice combo enabler to make Lost Mine just that much more effective. And the Drapion is in here to help out against Mew. And the supporter line is really where I think my list differs to Pedro's list, and I think that's the biggest debate right now. First of all, whether or not you want to play Cross Switchers. I'm still a big fan of Cross Switcher in the deck because I love to rinse and repeat Charizard in the later stages. And by playing Boss's Orders, your opponent makes that Charizard play a lot less effective, because you may be at the later stages where you can only use like Klara Rope Zard. I much prefer having that combo of Cross Switcher Klara as a way to just take those final prizes off the board. It also makes Echoing Horn much more effective, I feel, as a combination card. So I'm really happy with Cross Switchers, like the early renditions of Charizard. I definitely feel like this is the strongest. And it gives you extra digs with Comfey as well, which is a minor thing compared to Boss's Orders. But also, in the place of some of these bosses, I'm playing Raihans, and I think Raihan is just a great card to make your Charizard come online that little bit quicker, where you can get a turn attachment and a Raihan. Now your opponent only needs to have taken 3 prize cards for Charizard to be online early, and again, you sort of work in Klaras towards the later stages and Pal Pad. So that's really good. But also it's an enabler. It makes the cross switchers better cards. It makes things like the Echoing Horn, the belts, these 1-ofs and 2-ofs, just all that more effective. So I really like having Raihan. Also, we like to pay retreat our energies on Comfeys in the opening stages, because then it just opens up our supporter outs for us. So when we are getting hit early with judges and all this other stuff, we have the Colress, the Gears, and Raihan now to sort of add to our draw support account, just to make sure that we're staying in the game, really, because oftentimes you just want to Raihan an energy to Comfey to retreat and go into a Cram, or get a turn attachment and still Sableye and such. So I feel like this is a really nice card. Klara's obviously still a big part of the deck, where we try and Charizard and Sableye a bunch. And that's really all that's going on here. The Echoing Horn is helpful in like mirror match situations, guardy situations, where you can just bring back lower hit point stuff very easily, but also can allow the Charizard to be more dangerous into multi-prize matchups, of course. It is a bit more combo reliant, but I still feel like this is pretty fine. I think one of the only other things to talk about is I'm playing triple Beach Court. Sometimes you can see Magma Basin in here. If you play Basin, I think I like a 3-3 split of the energies rather than a 4-2. And I do like Choice Belts. I think it definitely helps out against Lugia. Not just so that Charizard can knock out a Lugia cleanly, but it also makes like the early Cram pressure just much more effective. It gets around things like Radiant Serena quite nicely to allow you to two-shot through a T-Tar as well, which is pretty nice. So, and also if the opponent doesn't have board space for a Serena, you can try and two-shot through a Lugia. It's not that convoluted if you weave in a Raihan to try and get the second Cram going as well, if you went for an early belt play. So these are things to bear in mind. I personally really like Radiant Charizard. It's definitely one of the decks that I'm going to be taking to challenges and cups, because I've played the deck for a long time in the Silver Tempest formats and before that, so I'm pretty comfortable with the deck, and I feel like it's still very powerful going into this next format. So hope you enjoy the games, and I'll see you tomorrow for another video. Cheers. If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. So, looks like we get to go first in this game one here. We have a pretty good start. We have Comfey and Battle VIP. Can't be too sad about that. We see a mulligan from the opponent as well, and we're up against Goodra, so we do get a freebie card. But pretty good. We even top deck Manaphy that makes this VIP even easier. Definitely important to look through prize cards in this deck, because you really need to be pretty specific with your resources. We definitely want to keep an eye on our ropes, our cross switchers in this matchup, as well as, you know, just the regular Klara, Raihan stuff, and make sure you have access to Pal Pad, these sorts of things. Not going to give my opponent the freebie Stadium, because I know they also want to be dancing with Comfeys. Echoing Horn is valuable in this matchup because we can bring back single prizes for easy, one prize knockouts to bring us back onto even prizes. So hopefully we go through less Goodra. Or can be helpful at bringing back a Goodra V, possibly for a Gust knockout with Charizard. The opponent gets the early Ultra Ball Melanie combo for their Goodra. So not much in the way of the Lost Zone, so I'm not expecting a Cram hit from them. However, they are getting pretty well set up here with the Greninja into the VIP for some Comfey action, no doubt. Could even be backup Goodra at this point as well, if they don't expect to be doing many selects. But it is just going to be, switching into a Comfey, and can begin fueling up that Lost Zone. They actually have a double switch, so they can get to 2. Not too shabby. Get rid of an energy recycler, that's not too bad for us. As we top deck into Comfey. Rope and Fire Energy are both really good cards, to be honest with you. If we get the Fire Energy in the discard part early, it really helps out our Raihans as well. And I'm pretty happy just going through the active Pokemon here as well if I can, because I really didn't want to play this Rope, because our opponent can kind of block it with Greninja a little bit and make our Cram a lot worse, but at least we have that guaranteed hit now. And we have the dreaded Charizard versus Colress, so we have to say no to a supporter this turn, unfortunately. But we can at least retreat and spit innocently. They're at 2 in the Lost Zone, we're at 4. So this damage can still be relevant. We obviously have Hawlucha in hand, so we're looking to probably sable down the Comfeys, but then, we're also holding the Horn, so you can bring back a Comfey and then try and sprinkle with Greninja. Sprinkle to finish off Greninja and a Comfey, and then I really need to only go through one Goodra, which is actually pretty easy for us, especially with like Rope Boss plays, Rope Switcher plays. Speaking of which, our opponent is going to get their V-Star out and Rope into us, And they are going to be rolling by the looks of things. And take the first prize in the initiative in this game. Switch Cart's not a bad pickup, so we can get more selectings. That's an easy choice with the Drapion hitting the Lost Zone. This gets us to 6, I believe, in the Lost Zone. And we have the debate of whether I want to Cross Switcher for a Cram prize this turn, or if I want to have the cherry pick of Colress. And I think getting to 10 is more important here. So it's an obviously much easier decision if that was just a raw Colress, but I think in this instance, trying to give yourself better odds of getting towards Sable is probably the best choice here, because we've already spent a couple ropes. One's in the Lost Zone, one's already played. We can't just allow this Goodra to get too much value. So I want to be Sableyeing ideally next turn. I take the Choice Belt as well because it's pretty handy on Charizard at times, but also could be Lost Vacuum fodder for next turn, helping us get to 10, even without the need for Colress. So I could try and selecting and Raihan and then vacuum away Belt to get to 10 as well. It's another alternative for us next turn. So I really value that Vacuum Belt combo quite highly. I still get the 30 hit in on Hisuian Goodra because it then gives me that license to vacuum away Belt next turn, knowing that a Charizard could still do switcher plays into this Goodra exactly. It also gives them something to think about Moisture Star really here. The only punishing thing about this is it gives the opponents a way, if they are playing the Crystal Cave, to just undo essentially our entire turn, as they now are 2 prize cards up. And we definitely want to get to 10 here, no doubt about it. We have Switch Cart and Colress, but we are already at 6, I believe. Let's have a look at our... Hopefully I can see my Lost Zone in a moment. With Cross Switcher, I can already... Sorry, with Lost Vacuum, I can already get there with Raihan this turn. So I think we actually just say no to Colress again here, surprisingly. But it also shows how easy this deck can fuel its own Lost Zone. We can Beach Court Retreat. We've got the Hawlucha play for the Comfeys here. And I'm debating going for Raihan on Charizard this turn, just to get that in the mix and get it threatened early. We know our opponent can play, most likely, just Roxanne. There's already one in their discard pile, I believe, from their early Ultra Ball. But some play 2, you know, it's not unrealistic. Okay, so we didn't even need to use the Vacuum to get to 10 here. We had enough pivot outs already, so... Yeah, easy route to Sableye to level up the prize trade here and just stifle our opponent's draw. They're sat on a 5-card hand. Yes, they have Greninja, but they're not going to be able to open up their gates or anything like that, which is at least some clog for them. So, just a 9 Comfey seems pretty valuable here. Our opponent probably doesn't want to put down any more Comfeys either, because then it gives us that easier prize map. But we are already holding on to Echoing Horn Klara. So I'm probably just going to Sableye again next turn, honestly, as the opponent just continues to roll. That's pretty much all they can do. Other than, like, bossing up Manaphy, they're just limited to a prize a turn, and there's no question about that. They're pretty linear at this stage. So we're actually pretty far ahead with this Echoing Horn play. I can just Klara back Sableye Psychic. And then it's really just working towards Cross Switcher rope plays. That's the next sort of chapter for us, where I want to make this Charizard happen. I'm also putting back some draw supporters rather than the other Klara here, knowing that I already have Klara in hand if our opponent wants to gust our Charizard next turn, because I'll be taking 2 prize cards this turn. But also it plays around Roxanne better, right, if they do have that second copy. So I'm covered on both bases here. As we Sableye us down to just 2 prize cards. They incidentally will go for the Boss's Orders play to bring up this Charizard, and they will just roll through us. So we have a pretty easy route here. We just need to try and select into Cross Switcher, but we actually top deck it in the end. So that's pretty decent. But we had 2 turns to try and make this combo happen, so had plenty of draws to get there. And yeah, not too much of an issue. Even just trying to find a rope there would have been game as well. So plenty of outs to beat the Goodra. It's actually a pretty good matchup for Radiant Charizard, unlike the regular Lost Zone box builds, I think. Let's get into our next game. And we have another decent start. No supporter just yet, but we are getting to go first, and we have, wow, VIP off the top. That makes our hand way better. So again, we can just focus on Comfeys and Crams. That is one of the benefits of this Charizard build. You don't have to, like, divide up your resources with early ball search between Comfey and Greninja. You just go, I'm going for Comfey, I'm fueling that Lost Zone. Decide to keep the Cross Switcher because we are up against a Guardy, and Cross Switching down like Curliers and other easy prizes can be pretty massive for us. So We are going to get an extra dip in with Comfey. It's an awkward select because Echoing Horn is nice, as we just saw in the last game. Just bringing back lower hit point things is pretty strong. But we are just going to keep a rope instead here, just to make sure we don't miss a beat with flower selectings. We still don't have supporter, right? So you want to have as many dips with the Comfey as possible. And again, that same process of wanting to put energy in the discard pile rather than Beach Court, because we want to be manually attaching our energy later on in the game rather than like early. And also banking energy in the discard pile is great for Klara and Raihan, right? So all of our supporters benefit from energy in the bin. And Beach Court is like a more valuable resource in the mid to late game. So our opponent's getting pretty well set up with Greninja and a ton of Rolts, which is pretty much all they can ask for here. The only thing they haven't done is get a Zacian Intrepid Sword combo. Not Intrepid Sword, the other one. Roar of the Sword? Yeah, that combination. We do selecting into a Colress. And I am going to rope now just so that I can get an easy Cram prize. We have some pretty easy selects. I actually have prized a Sableye, so the debate was whether I take the nest and just thin the deck of a Sableye or take the Hisuian just to have access to both. And now, incidentally, I actually get the nest ball off the next selecting, which is pretty good for us. Now we are going to develop the stadium. I'm happy enough just knocking out this Mew. I know, like, we could just try and cross switcher for a Rolts, but this Mew is also helping them get to candies, and that's really the thing that the only thing they can use to speed up their next turn, right? So actually denying the Mew is probably the highest value target, to be honest with you. We've also done pretty well with that Colress on our turn to get a decent number of cards in our lost zone, so we're pretty close to Sableye even from next turn. Incidentally, the opponent does candy into a Shining Arcana Guardy. And they actually hit double energy? No shot they're going to hit us this turn. Another candy, another Shining Arcana. Whoa. Off the 4 cards, they hit 3 Psychic Energy. This is the only possible outcome, outside of getting their EX down, that they could have hit us this turn. Absolute insanity that they went... And the Judge! My goodness. Wow, that's insane. They even get a Collapse down. That's fine as well. But wow, absolutely insane. The only downside of the play that they made is that obviously I can get to 10 here. We have 7 in the zone already, and I have found Colress. So I can get to 10 and Sableye them. And then their Curlier is just done, and they'll have no EX to deal, like, to be able to build up their guys. So they'll be forced, essentially, to put down more Curlier and Rolts for easier prizes. Looks like the only way I can use Cram this turn is to Cross Switcher, so we are burning those, but I can bring the Greninja into the active when they don't have the EX. That's actually super annoying for them. And we can use our 8 counters to deal with Curlier, and then use the rest to put this Guardy into Cram range, and then the Greninja into Sable range. So that's the idea around our counters, and Sableye is just so efficient. We've got it online pretty quickly. And even though our opponent high rolled double candy, now that they, from this point on, I expect they're going to have to slow evolve up, right? That's their issue. They've spent their candies, so they're going to have to put Rolts down. They'll be vulnerable. Then Curliers, they'll be vulnerable. Like, they can't really get through 5 prizes just with their board state right now, so they naturally have to put down more things that I can just burn through at this stage. So I think we're already, like, pretty far ahead, to be honest with you. And they actually missed the attack this turn, so they were able to high roll the attack last turn, but still ended up whiffing later on, so kind of good for us. I'm going to get the extra Hisuian value here. I'm also going to get Charizard into the mix at this stage. And I have a pretty easy loss mine of just deal with Crest, because I put them still back in that same position where they need to high roll if they're going to hit with the fresh Guardy at this point. With like turn attachment onto the Greninja, pay retreat, and Arcana has to hit like 2 energies, right? So I'm not too worried about that. And if they're just attach retreating or using like Penny and stuff like that, I feel pretty okay about it, to be honest with you. They're most likely having to go into the damaged Guardy, so I can just cram it next turn. We're pretty far ahead, long story short. And yeah, they are having to put more Rolts into play. As I said, they can't just rely on these 2 Guardy to see them through the whole game. They have to put down these vulnerable Pokemon. They can combine it with Judge, though, which is pretty much the best outcome they could have done, because we were really working on a large hand. So they've at least made it harder for us to just like get a Klara, easy knockout on the Rolts, and spray more counters around the board. We're going to bring up our Comfey. We have a number of switch carts, which is pretty strong for us. Just come and look through our switch outs. The Drapion's really bad in this deck. It's literally only for Mew, but it means it's a really easy selecting very often in the deck. Unlike other Lost boxes where it's a bit more debate in Guardy because you have Mirage Gates, in this one it's literally Drapion has one job and one job only, and that is to deal with Mew. I'm going to get one more selecting in because I haven't played a supporter yet. And now we have access to Klara, which is interesting. I am just going to attach Retreat to this Cram and probably just keep Klara for next turn, in case I once again get Roxanne or anything like that. I think that's the only thing I'm afraid of here, because we are just flying ahead. So even though I had the window of opportunity to use Klara, I only want to do it on the turn I like bench attached to Sableye, essentially. I don't want to do it and then just hold all the pieces in hand, because it makes disruption worse for us. The opponents can evolve into Curlier and get a cheeky refinement in. They do have quite a good number of easy prize cards around, bearing in mind that we also have the Charizard, and our opponent's slowly taking those prize cards. Charizard's slowly getting into the game. So Fog Crystal, they can just come in and Brainwave now. Don't really see what else they can do. They actually put a Zacian down, so there's actually a chance we win next turn. They hit us with another Judge, really are spamming those Judges on us. There is a world where we win, right? Because I think I have access to my other two Cross Switchers. We have already played 2 this game, but I don't think I've got rid of any into the Lost Zone. So there is a world where I can Raihan Cross Switcher. So if I see any off flower selecting here, I do just win the game. Raihan's actually pretty big. Obviously, we had the Pokégear, but I was happy with basically every supporter here. And I still want to keep this Pokégear open to me, because we're, again, still so far ahead that gearing first gave me a better chance of winning this turn, but I have such a buffer in prize cards. I just want to keep things in my hand and deck so I don't just lose to random hand disruption, because something has to go desperately wrong for it to be a problem for us at this stage. So we actually settle for just Sableyeing down this Curlier, and I can do the same thing where I set up this Guardy for a Cram hit, and now the Greninja for a Cram hit as well. So even like my last rope or two could be pretty handy at this stage. And you can see I'm actually checking these out, how many outs I have to ropes, and I think it is exactly 1 left. So rope is good, our cross switches are good still. We have a 9-card deck with like 3 of those cards in the deck being supporters as well, I think. So we're pretty robust as hand disruption, and I don't see how they get out of this board state. With no EX, of course, they're just in a really bad spot. They can come in Brainwave, and we just have Charizard on board to win. So, and Cram on board. So many things just there, ready, waiting to go. We're essentially miles ahead of this Guardy. We just got out the blocks faster. I definitely think it's a priority for the Guardy players to try and utilize Zacian early so they can try and make some collapsed and penny plays to make it harder for us, because this game we simply got ahead with Crams and Sables and just never slowed down from that stage. We also hurt their engine in the process throughout, which is obviously very good for us, so we can just finish off the game here with a big Lizard to take that last prize without having to play anything here. Pretty easy. My brilliant strategy once again paying off. Looks like our opponent's going first for this one. And they're off to a flyer here with Comfey, Nestball. Our hand is cracked though. We have double Comfey, double VIP, and a Switch Cart, so we should be drawing a few cards here. See Greninja. Gate into the Lost Zone, which means we're definitely on high alert for getting Manaphy developed early. Opponent with a really good hand here. Concealed cards, double flower selecting in the opening stages. Can even get a manual attachment into a Greninja here. We pick up even more Ball Search, which is something I can just hold for later turns now, while we can have a look through the deck. Manaphy, as you can see, with this much Ball Search, I definitely want to prioritize getting Manaphy developed. I'm weaving in the Charizard here as well. It can sometimes be useful as a sponge to our opponent's Cramorants, because Cram does not hit for weakness, remember. So it can be something we go for. We are able to select into Colress, which really unlocks this hand a lot more. I already had Fire in your hand, so I'm happy enough Lost Zoning the other copy. And now I can just pay retreat, bank that energy in the discard pile, which makes it so much easier for me to access it later on in the game. I decided on holding off on this board space because oftentimes you want a floating space in this matchup so you can Sableye and Hawlucha all in one go. It's like a long down the line play, but definitely is helpful. And also there's an argument to having less 70 hit point Pokemon in play at some points in the game to make it harder for the opponent. And we know our opponent's not going to look to hand disrupt us this early in the game in a Lost Zone mirror, so we may as well just hold these pieces. Our opponent currently getting to 4 in the Lost Zone with their own Chorus here. We're not too worried about any gate attackers at this point, really. I think only a Snorlax would be scary. But even then, we could try and get close to 10 next turn and maybe Sableye down this Comfey and put things into range like the Greninja and stuff. But it looks like it's just going to be a cram response from them. Keeping up in tempo, they actually get a Nest Ball as well. They're going to get an early Sableye down. That's completely fine. Another attachment onto Greninja. I'm still not too afraid of this Greninja at all until our opponent starts bossing us. Switch Cart, not too shabby. I'm just developing a Manaphy, a Sableye here. I know I have one in hand, but as we know, it's all about chaining the Sableye in this matchup. And we are getting close to that 10. Again, we have Vacuum and Raihan here, so we can try and get very close. The rope is looking like a pickup here. Not sure how many we actually have in there. But if I'm Raihanning, let's have a look. So we're at 6 in the Lost Zone. So we actually whiffed on the Colress. Colress would have got us there, right? Because I could get 2 more in via the Colress and then go for my Vacuum Stadium play. So it looks like I just have to cram respond here. And I think I'm debating whether or not to attach this energy, but I just hold off. Just in case our opponent gets to 10 themselves, I don't want to waste a Psych Energy on a Sableye that then just gets taken out by them. So our opponent is at 5. And they can now go to 7, 8 with the Comfey. So it's whether or not they can get Vacuum plays in. I think they've already got a Comfey in the discard pile and in their Lost Zone. So I don't think they can do it just from selectings. I think it would have to be a Vacuum play. We haven't seen any Seal Stones from them just yet, but I've seen Darkness Energy, which makes me think it's like a Moltres, Greninja, Kyogre build, probably. So I'm not too afraid of Vacuums. I think this list itself doesn't have many space for Vacuums, so I don't think they're getting to 10 here very easily. So the best thing they can do is a Cram hit, but I have dealt with Cram already. Pokestop hitting the Lost Zone now. Yeah, so they're 8, with 1 Comfey in the zone, 1 in the discard pile, so I don't think they can get to 10, even with a huge number of switch outs in their hand. We're actually going to see an Energy Recycler. So maybe they're going for a gate play here with a certain card, maybe Snorlax. No, it's going to be a Moltres coming in. Fire Wrath can respond on this Cram. They just get the 1 energy via the Molt ability, and then they gate a Darkness and a Psychic out. Oh, but it looks like they only have Rope, and I can just feed them Charizard here and actually tank a Molt hit. They could have Greninja hit just for the weakness and taken the prize. But now I feel really ahead, right? We're already a prize ahead, and now I'll be able to Sableye pretty easily this turn just with Selectings and Chorus. So I will be initiating the Lost Mine, and oftentimes that's a big part of the mirror, right, as we know. Yeah, happy enough to get rid of Vacuum and Nest Ball at this stage. Hawlucha also a very strong card for math fixing. We're going to play a Rope ourselves here and see how our opponent reacts. And now they bring up the Moltres, I feel pretty happy to Beach Court. We'll keep the Klara, it is more important than the Horn. Unfortunate that they're up against each other, but again, we're pretty far ahead here. And we can just weave in the Lost Mine now. Maybe some debate to me vacuuming away like the Miltank that was in my hand. Or something similar to that effect, just to hand thin. But honestly, I like having Beach Court in play. The only thing I'm afraid of again at this stage is Roxanne, though, because we are pretty far ahead. And some Lost Zone builds will play Rocks. It's more likely that Greninja builds will, to be honest. even though we have seen Pedro played Roxanne in his Charizard list, I feel like Rox just doesn't work as well in the Charizard build as it does in the Greninja, because if you Sableye knock out their Manaphy on the turn you Roxanne, you make it hard for the opponent to re-establish Manaphy, and that's when they can take additional multi-prize turns with Greninja and stuff. So maybe a small debate to vacuuming away Miltank there, but the rest of the hand is pretty stacked, let's be fair. The opponent is going to Flower Selecting, get their Greninja rolling, and they're going to Colress, so they must be at over 10 now as well. So surely it's their turn to Lost Mine us. Yeah, we see Psych Energy to Sableye. But we have such a buffer here. Yeah, they even have the Flying Entry, but this actually helps us, right? Because they put another 70 hit point Pokemon down now. So I can, yeah, especially because they're targeting Manaphy Comfey, I can now Hawlucha their Hawlucha and Comfey and just Lost Mine straight back. So that's completely fine by me. The Hawlucha for them was very neutral, actually. It didn't really help them too much. Like, I get that they're pretty far behind, but them putting down that extra 70 hit pointer then enables our Hawlucha to be really good. Which is quite funny. I'm going to Fog out this. I have the option to Klara back Manaphy here, but I actually go for a more aggressive line, which is just Sableye Psychic. Basically me saying I'm not afraid of them using Greninja next turn. Even if it is for double Sable, I think I'm pretty safe there. I think one thing I should have done here was vacuum away the Miltank and replay Beach Court. I don't see why I wouldn't have done that here. Probably should have played those. I probably also could have played the Nest Ball, honestly. I should have thinned more for Roxanne this turn, but it feels like I've been a little bit greedy here, possibly. Re-establishing Manaphy is like completely fine as well in this instance. But then they would just have Sableye anyway. Because I was choosing to take the 2-prize knockout, they could have just gone like Sprinkle on Charizard and Manaphy anyway. So having the extra hit points forces them down the Greninja route. So I'm basically telling them which prizes to take, right? And if they're knocking out the Sableyes, I at least get to promote Comfey next turn. So by doing this play, it made them have a good play, but it sort of dictates their play, if that makes sense. So that I can get that extra selecting in. Otherwise, they could have just even ignored Manaphy at that stage and just gone for Charizard, Comfey, Sprinkle, giving us less draw. But hey, we're so far ahead, I could have Sableyed for game, or as we're seeing, Charizard get involved. We are able to take the dub there. So yeah, really, as we know, it's a little bit about Manaphy maintenance and making sure that's sticking around to have a good time into most Lost Box. We get one more game in here. This is definitely going to be quite a short one. As you can see, sometimes you're not favoured into the Lost Zone deck mirror match. Because this one gets pretty scary. We do get to go first, and everything's looking pretty good. You know, we got the Comfeys, we got the early Switch Cart and Pay Retreat. So I'm going to be able to get a couple in the zone early. Already having the debate of Lost Vacuum, and you can see how highly I value getting to 10, and the Vacuum is one of our best activators for that. And I'm already holding on to some fodder cards, right? I have Miltank and Drapion, which are both terrible cards in this instance. Maybe some argument to bench Miltank here just to play around Rope Spit Innocently. I think that's the only thing that I could have done possibly differently that turn, as our opponent actually does go for an early Rope VIP themselves. I think I have to give up Cram here. My hand is so bad that I just need to work towards a supporter, and hopefully Comfey gets into the mix next turn. See another selecting from our opponents. And we actually see a Rope, so it's kind of a moot point anyway. Our opponent with a monster hand size. Second VIP pass, you do not like to see that. And we see the Dragonite come out. And the third flower selecting. Into the Forest Sealstone, you know that can't be good. And yeah, we are getting wombo comboed with the early Greninja play into the Vacuum, into the Mirage Gate. You hate to see it. They even got rid of their stadium before retreating, didn't they? I don't even know. But yeah, they're able to do a double Comfey. And yeah, our hand stinks, and they are 2 prizes up, and we can't simply spit innocently to respond here, so that is pretty much all she wrote. Yeah, that's a concede. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts on Radiant Charizard as the best build of Lost Box. Who knows? Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow for another video. Cheers.